Of everything we're going to talk about over the whole stress thing. Toxic environments and toxic relationships is the worst stressor that I've seen that affects people.
Like we said last week about the worst case scenario, also look at the best case scenario, because the chances of either of them happening are the same.
People that actually watched 6 hours of news coverage on the Boston Marathon bombings had a higher acute stress response than the people that were actually directly involved in it.
You get 100 comments on a Facebook post, 99 positive, 1 negative. You forget about the 99 positive, literally forget. All you think about is that one comment.
Fear is false evidence appearing real.
If we didn't have any uncertainty in life, it would be so boring. Hey there, and welcome to the Future Fitness Lifestyle. If you're passionate about staying fit, healthy, and mentally sharp, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Matt Cooney, and each week we dive into the latest trends, expert insights, and actionable tips to help you take your fitness, nutrition, and mental well-being to the next level. Ready to level up your health and fitness? Let's jump in and get started. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Future Fitness Lifestyle. Today we have, I think this is part 4 of the stress series, which I think is just going to keep going on. There's probably going to be 10 parts of this. Because this is the second half of last week's. And so we've went through so far. First off, massive thank you to anyone who has given us feedback. I know I've been talking to quite a few people who have found this really interesting so far, which is great to see. So first we looked at what is stress. Then we looked at the effects the stress has on the body. Last week we looked at half of the mental and emotional stressors that I see that a lot of people kind of deal with, which was overwhelm, expectations and pressure, and worrying. So this week, we're going to go over the next 3, which is uncertainty, relationships, and fear and self-doubt. First, how is everybody this week? I'm laughing because we're doing a podcast about stress, and I'm feeling quite mentally and physically stressed this week. So it's probably good to talk about it, you know?
Yeah, take your own advice.
Yeah, so if you see me laughing throughout any of the podcasts, it's just me not taking my own advice.
Yeah.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
And today we have 4 of us. Tommy is not here, and I presume he's going to listen back to this at some stage. So just to say, Tommy, we are thinking of you at the moment, and yeah, he will be back, I'm sure, in the next week or 2. So first topic that I want to run through is uncertainty. So I think this is something that affects all of us, but I definitely see it, and it's probably linked in with worrying that we talked about last week. And this can come with just uncertainty about the future, whether it's your job security, financial stress, family and relationships being even unfulfilled in a way. And what do they call a midlife crisis sometimes? That happens. And it could be either questioning your purpose. I feel like with uncertainty, it's very much linked to a lot of major life changes, whether that's, getting a new job, changing relationship, changing country, and sometimes also dealing with things like loss or major changes in our life often bring about a lot of uncertainty. So anyone have any kind of thoughts on that topic first before we kind of delve into kind of a few ways to help manage it?
I think it's the unknown, isn't it, for people? It's the unfamiliar, it's the not known. It's like, what do they say? The 3 most stressful things, I think, is a new house, changing your job, or
Having kids?
having kids is the third one. So it's that kind of unknown. You've never been there before. So it causes those feelings of anxiousness, those feelings of overwhelm. You've never been there before. So it's all new experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
for some people it's exciting, but for some people it's like, oh my God, what's going to happen? what way is it going to go?
Yeah, and I was thinking, our brain craves predictability. It craves knowing kind of what's going to happen, and so when it is that unknown, you're triggering that stress response. And because we have negative bias, we always tend to fear what's going to happen, or look at the worst case or whatever, rather than looking at the opportunities. So that also causes that anxiety and overwhelm.
And I think as well, people maybe especially with uncertainty and worry and stuff like that, we kind of zone in on the negative parts and we just kind of like dismiss the positive things, or we like give, what's that thing, Matt, you always say, you glance at the positive and you stare at the negative or something, is it?
Yeah, that's
Where
I
you're
suppose
kind
you're
of
saying.
like, yeah.
Our negativity bias is like you get 100 comments on a Facebook post, 99 positive, 1 negative. You forget about the 99 positive, literally forget. All you can think about is that one comment. And logically, you just had a 99% success rate, but you only think about the 1%. And like literally, that 1% stops people from, there'll be people that would have done that, seen a negative comment, and never stopped taking action on maybe something they wanted to do, putting themselves out there, whatever it is. And like, that's even just talking this out loud, it seems a bit insanity, because it's like, I'm never going to get 100% of anything in life, And so, yeah, it's an interesting one. And it's something, I think, to be aware of it is really key, because then when you come to those situations, you can go, yeah, I know, kind of automatically I'm gonna think maybe the negative or the worst case. So it's like, okay, I need to really be aware of that, and also be able to kind of look at the positive, because again, you just got 99 good comments and you're not even acknowledging it, And the big thing that came up for me there with, you said it, Roshi, is like certainty is actually one of our primary human needs, and it's what we crave in life. And when I was asking your thoughts, the thing that always popped into my head when I think of uncertainty was, can I say COVID? Well, it's my podcast, but hopefully it doesn't take it. Yeah, hopefully this podcast doesn't get deleted. But COVID was the biggest example, I think, in my lifetime. Yeah. Roger, can you edit this out? So it's like do, and then we just put it on the screen.
Yeah. Just beep it out.
Or we need a code word for it. If I keep saying
the C word.
No, but the C word's then the other C word.
Yeah. People, remember that. No, so yeah, that was like the most uncertain time of probably all of our lives, and the effects that had on so many people, like mentally and to their health, and it's, if you had, where was this, and this is where, even with the mainstream media, everything going on, there was so much fear and uncertainty around it, that it's, a lot of people, they just weren't able to handle that. And Eve, what was that thing you told me about? Is it the Boston Marathon?
Oh yeah, with the, like, just even with people, like, that is a huge stressor for people, where they're like looking at, media coverage or news coverage, or constantly watching the news and looking at all the like awful things that are going on in the world, and people don't realize the impact that has on your stress. So like, obviously everyone has stresses in their life, like work, family, X, Y, and Z. And like, to a point, you can't control these things. But like, news media coverage is something that people have a direct control over, and like limiting how much they use it. I think I saw, what you were saying there about that. I saw a stat there like 2 weeks ago in the book I'm reading about people during the Boston Marathon bombings. People that actually watched 6 hours of news coverage on the Boston Marathon bombings had a higher acute stress response than the people that were actually directly involved in it. So it just goes to show like the impacts that can have. And there was like another stat as well, that they kind of put people in this room and they just had like loads of news coverage about terrorist attacks on the screens. They kind of left people in that room for a couple hours, and some of them had even experiences of like PTSD after it, even though like they weren't actually there. It wasn't happening to them, but like you were saying in the previous podcast, stress, it doesn't know if it's actually happening to you, or you're just kind of being like exposed to it at that time.
Yeah, I think a lot for humans as well. Like, you'll always even when you're watching a movie or something, if something sad happens in a movie, or if something stressful happens in a movie, you automatically kind of go to, oh my God, you put yourself into that situation, and you can feel those emotions. And like Eve said, our mind doesn't know what's real and what's not real, and so our body will respond. And yeah, so I think with news, limiting that, because a lot of marketing out there is fear-based marketing, and it's just kind of, it's rubbing that in your head, or it's telling you that you're not good enough, or you don't have this, or you don't have that, and that's just playing out in your head all the time.
And yeah, even if you think about it, if you look at the news, how many news stories are actually like positive? Like, I don't think I've ever seen anything positive on the news. It's all just like negative, 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 because that's what people want to see. Like, if you see articles online like crazy, like 20 people dead, or something terrible, you just naturally want to click it. Whereas if it's like an article like about puppies or something fun and nice, you're just kind of like, doesn't matter.
No news is good news, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is true though. It's funny because we were just watching a YouTube with a guy called Greg Doucette the other night, and he was saying he does this series on, it's called Natty or Not. So it's like whether or not people are natural or they're taking steroids. And he was saying if he makes one of those on somebody and he says the person is actually natural, he gets a ton of hate in the comments because people want him to tear other people down, to say they're not natural, they're taking steroids, they're liars. And it's like funny, he's like, I don't know what's wrong with people, but I can't say, if I say someone's natural, they hate me. It has to be the negative. Like they want to see me like tearing somebody else down, which is just funny. And Ro, you said it there about the cinema. Even like this is why before bed, like not watching like horror films, or you're meant to watch something like relaxing, because it can actually affect your sleep. And we've probably all experienced that actually. If you end up like watching a scary movie or horror or something like that, and then it actually you nearly dream about it, and you have all these weird effed up dreams. So yeah, it's funny how the mind does that essentially.
Yeah, definitely as well. Even like, that's why I would love to watch like crime and like those kind of scary things, but like your sleep afterwards, you're just too stressed going to bed. You just cannot switch off after it.
Actually reminds me of when I was a kid. Like, I remember me and Katie, we'd be down in the bedroom, we'd watch a horror or something, and then we'd be down in the bedroom and we'd actually imagine like rats or something in the bedroom, and we'd scare ourselves so much that we'd be like, oh my god, they're actually here, and we'd scream for mum, and she'd have to come down and turn on the light and be like, lads, you're standing in an empty room, why? But like, you get it worked up so much that you believe that the scenario could be actually playing out.
And yeah, so with certainty, it's, like I was saying, it's actually one of the primary human needs. But what's also interesting is another primary human need is uncertainty, is variety. And that's something to be mindful of as well, is that if everything was certain, if we didn't have any uncertainty in life, it would be so boring. Literally, it's like watching a movie that you already know everything that's going to happen. There's no point in even, it's like, am I just going to watch this, what's the movie, Groundhog Day? The same thing just happens over and over. Life would be pretty boring if you always knew the outcome of every single decision. So that's a way I like to look at it, that, each time you said it adds a bit of excitement to it. I think it's just being able to control that. And that's kind of one of the things I had for managing uncertainty, is something like what's called like your locus of control. So I love to saying like, focus on what you can control, cope with what you can't, and focus on what matters most. So for a lot of us, with that uncertainty, you can't essentially control it. You don't know, like even the weather. We're going through like a cyclone here. We can't, at the moment, I can't control the weather, but I can cope with it, and then I can focus on doing the best things that I can right now around that situation. So is there any other things that you guys use or tools to help manage that stress when you do feel maybe very uncertain?
I think your ability to be able to adapt. I think that's really, really important. Like, even I see the last 2 weeks, I think for me, my routine has just been all over the place, and I just actually realized how much better I am to be able to adapt. And okay, like, things mightn't go as they normally would, because usually I would be quite routine with things, but it's being able to change them and kind of have a plan B, and not kind of getting as overwhelmed or stressed if things aren't going the way they normally would or you had originally planned. And I think that that's a major one. You know, you can look at control when there's kind of change and when there's feelings of anxiousness, but I think as well looking at your ability to adapt when things are going a little left or when there's change going on.
That Bruce Lee quote, be like water. That Bruce Lee quote, isn't it? Be like water. I can't remember the rest of it, but it was something to do with a bottle. When the water's in a bottle, it becomes a bottle. When it's in a teapot, it becomes a tea. Is that right?
Yeah. Be like water, my friend.
Yeah.
I just feel like going like that.
I'm just going to say there with uncertainty as well, it's like a big thing is like trusting yourself. Like if you can zoom out and like look at all the days that you've survived already, like trust yourself that no matter what kind of happens, you are capable of getting through it. And like Matt was saying earlier as well, like uncertainty, like if you think of all the times in your past that you didn't have control over it or you were uncertain, a lot of the times the outcome is good or something good comes from it, or it is this, you know, opportunity for growth. Or if it's on like stuff that aren't unplanned evenings or unplanned stuff that happens, usually there is a good thing that comes from it. So it's, I think again, like the negative bias, we'll always look at things going wrong rather than seeing that there's a possibility for them to actually have a good outcome. So trusting yourself is a huge thing, I think, and knowing that like you will be able to navigate it.
Eckhart Tolle talks about that, as in your ego, like you're saying, Ro, about trust. Kind of, I read The Power of Now, and it was a big read, but he was on a podcast and he was talking, if you look at like your ego, its job is to keep you safe. Ego is edge, good, out. So when there's like uncertainty, when there's unfamiliarity, you're automatically, to keep yourself safe, you're going to rule out trust that things might work out or the good in the situations that are going on around you, or the trust in yourself to be able to get through them.
I think you said it, Rose, having that growth mindset towards it, I think is really important, because some of the best outcomes and things that happen in your life come off the back of those uncertain times. And you even look at like the C word, that period of time, there's so many people that off the back of that have now completely maybe changed their life for the better, you know, whether it's creating businesses, changing their careers, whatever path it did, you know. And that was like not intended, obviously. Nobody knew that was happening and there was no certainty around anything at that point. But, you know, again, like you said, it's just trusting yourself. And I think another one with this is journaling. I actually think writing down your thoughts can be really beneficial, because when you feel uncertain, again, a lot of time, like you said, Sharon, you don't feel safe. When you don't feel safe, you don't think straight sometimes. And so actually journaling your thoughts and how you're feeling, and kind of like, I feel like a lot of the time with journaling, you can actually figure some stuff out that you wouldn't really figure out keeping it just in your head, you know?
Yeah, it's getting it out of your mind or your body is the key, because then you're able to like look at it from a different lens almost. And like we said last week about the worst case scenario, also look at the best case scenario, because the chances of either of them happening are the same. So, you know, we always look at the worst when there is another option.
Yeah. And does anyone have any other ones before we move on to relationships? Good. I actually had one which is kind of like different, but I think it's important, is actually like reinforcing your own purpose, values, and living in line with them. Because again, through uncertain times, if you can still live by your values and have a purpose and follow that, you're going to be on the right path. And whatever happens, like Sharon said, you'll be able to adapt and keep moving towards, if you can kind of use your own purpose as your like North Star and always kind of move towards that, even when life throws those big changes at you, you can keep moving forward, you know.
And I think as well, for a lot of people during the schmo of a time, we won't say COVID, they had the time, they had the slower paced life, they had time on their own, and they were able to like figure out maybe who they were, their values, and then as a result they were able to make changes coming out the other side of it and follow their North Star, whereas before they just might have been going through the motions.
Yeah. A lot of people, I've definitely talked to a lot of people who were like that, that they just didn't know until they were forced. It's like until your hand is forced to change, sometimes you don't really know what the other side is actually like, because you're just so used to living a certain way. And that kind of actually is a nice segue into the next one, which is relationships. So I feel like this is a huge one. We've obviously done a podcast, I feel like that's so long ago now. I think one of our first podcasts was about relationships, but it definitely can cause a lot of mental and emotional stress. And I think with this is different relationships. You're going to have your friends, your family, work. And I think what happens here for a lot of people is things like not communicating your needs. So essentially miscommunication, not having open and honest conversations, being in toxic environments and toxic relationships, whether that's friends, family, partners, whatever it is, work. And sometimes as well, I feel like people who are like wanting to be liked or not wanting to cause conflict with the relationship, which then causes a lot of mental and emotional stress. And the last one was probably like loneliness as well, or lack of support, or feeling like you're not being supported in a relationship, whatever relationship that is. So does anyone have any thoughts on that, or even ways to kind of manage those times? I think it's probably something we all experience at a certain points in our life.
Yeah, I think a huge thing with relationships is the communication. We're not great at communicating, and that is a huge thing, because I feel like, and we said this before in their last podcast on communication, is that like when you say, there's two sides to everything you say. When you say something, it's what you say and it's what the other person hears. It could be completely different. Having that communication, like you could spend the whole week worrying about one little conversation and the other person mightn't have meant it in that way at all, but you've just spent a whole week wrecking your head when you could have just had a bit of a conversation. And there's different ways to have those conversations that it doesn't seem like, because again, it's the whole idea of you want to be liked and you're afraid of conflict and you don't want to say something that will hurt someone. But I think it was Mel Robbins as well that said that a good one is saying like the story you're telling yourself. So if I go up to you and I'm like, look, the story I'm telling myself is that you're really mad at me because I said this and blah, blah, blah. And that way you're not putting blame on the person, but you're showing them your perspective, and then they can come back and be like, oh, what? The story I was telling myself is I wasn't mad at you at all. I'm just like busy and blah, blah, blah. And then you solve that communication. So I think a big stressor with relationships is the lack of communication and ruminating in our own heads the conversations that we've had.
That's so funny, actually, Roisin. I just thought of something that I saw the other day. It's basically like if you live with one other person, so like if you're a couple, or if you just live with a friend, and if there's something around the house that's like messy or like wrecked or not tidied, instead of saying like, Matt, you didn't clean the dishes, you have like a third person.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, so it could be me and Matt living in a house and it's just the two of us, but we just invent this imaginary person called Johnny. So I'll just say, Jesus, Johnny's after leaving the dishes in the sink again. So then Matt is like, oh, I'll have a word with Johnny and he'll get that sorted. So it's kind of like, it's a good way to kind of not just straight away be like, Matt, you're leaving stuff all around the house again. It kind of breaks that conflict. I actually meant to say that. I was going to start doing that and see if it worked.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've never heard of Johnny. I don't know this Johnny character. Does he?
Well, he's moving in with us next week.
But that's so true. It's like having that third person, or because essentially you're not blaming, you're not like attacking somebody else. You're talking about the problem as like its own thing, rather than saying that the other person is the problem. Which just helps, because as humans then we'll just react usually in a negative way.
I think for a lot of us though, it's so true, like communication is so important. And I love what you said as well, Ro, the I heard, when you say that this is what I'm hearing. I love that. But I think that for so many of us, and I know for myself for so long, communication is really hard, or even like not even conflict, but just kind of that arguing for better, because so many of us didn't see it growing up. You know, it was like abnormal. Silence, I can't remember who told me this or where I heard it, but when there's silence, when things aren't being communicated, that's actually a major source of anxiety, because you don't know what's going on. You don't know why it started, how you're going to end it. And a lot of kind of adults who are more anxious might have had that growing up, that instead of the communication, there was silence.
Yeah, and just basically like bottling things up, but like the longer you bottle things up, it's just eventually gonna overflow. Like,
Yeah.
I actually think out of everything we're going to talk about over the whole stress thing, toxic environments and toxic relationships is I'm going to go out on a limb and say, the worst stressor that I've seen that affects people. Like, Eve, you'll have seen this before. Like, we've had clients who will get out of a toxic environment, whether that's like a relationship or say work environment. Like, in 1 week, they'll lose like 10 pounds, and not even just losing weight. Their face, the complexion of their face, their skin color has changed. Like the way they're even carrying themselves. It's actually pretty, it's kind of those things you wouldn't really believe it until you actually see it. And if you ever hear of like, you know, when people are carrying weight, as in not just like, I don't mean physical weight, like, you know, you feel like you're with stress, you're
emotional
carrying
baggage.
yeah, on you. It's like because a lot of time again in that toxic environment relationship, they don't leave. Like, you don't just go like, it happens Monday, you leave on Tuesday. It could be years, you know, and then that builds and builds, and obviously it becomes normal as well. A lot of people, and that's the thing. I'm saying it's probably the most impactful. It's also probably one of the the hardest thing to deal with, or again change or make a decision. I don't want to go down the really deep hole that this could go down, but it's just something I think I want to make people aware of it, that like when you look at long-term things that will affect your health, a toxic environment is, for me, right up there with anything that we have.
Because it does affect you, like a toxic person or a toxic environment. I remember a friend of mine, she was working in a job, she was in an office, and there was this woman there, and she was quite toxic and quite like just really not nice to her. And the environment wasn't great. And someone told her, get a plant and put it at the front of her desk. And it was nearly like, you know, the plant, like, it was taking in the negativity or the toxicity. But the side of the plant from the front, all the leaves and everything were all like browning and things. It didn't stay alive.
But that's it. Like, we're all energy, and that's the thing. You'll even notice if you are around somebody who has, you know, somebody who's like very negative or whatever, and you spend time with them, like coming away from that, you feel drained. Like, you feel like they've sucked the life out of you just because of their negative energy. And I think another thing that's important with communication in relationships is like, start good communication from the get-go. Like, the hard conversations don't have to be the fights. You know, you should like learn to, and I know it's a lot easier said than done, but like learning to express your needs on the normal days, because the beautiful thing about humans is we all have completely different perspectives on everything. Like, not one of us is going to think the same way about a conversation or a word or our upbringing and stuff. And knowing that like what you believe, another person might not have the exact same beliefs, and that's completely okay. And so it's about trying to have that good communication from the get-go and expressing your needs when not necessarily in an argument, but like just an everyday conversation, because then it helps then when stuff does get a little bit, when it does get like into confrontation, it's easier for you to like step up and be like, okay, this is how I'm feeling, can we look at this, and blah blah blah.
I just thought as well, when you said about those negative people, there's a study in 2006 called the bad apple effect, and I can't remember it fully. Basically, it took like one negative person, the results of just one negative person I think it was in a work environment, was like there was 40% people their productivity, they were 40% worse on all tasks. There was a 25% decrease in the quality of their work, and there was 50% increase in conflicts in the workplace with one person, one negative person in that environment. Like, there was more stuff in it, but that's just one person. And that's like, could have been a positive environment and you stick one person in it, that's where, again, the bad apple effect. So that's like crazy to see that effect on a team in a work environment. So you can imagine, I presume that study was only short term, you can imagine what that would be like for five years.
Physiologically as well, someone who's like really negative or really angry or just toxic or wound up all the time, they would really affect you. You would be, your nervous system would be on overdrive around them because you're like trying to anticipate, Jesus, don't want to set this person off, or what if I say this, or what if I say that, that physiologically you'll be internally stressed when you're around them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
what is it called? Energy vampires.
Energy vampires, yeah.
Energy drainers. I think that's for helping to manage that is, honestly, if you can eliminate it, which is going to be very hard, but even like cutting it off or minimizing it, because again, sometimes you just can't eliminate it, but you can get to a point where, again, you either cut it off or you minimize it, whether it's trying to get yourself out of that environment into different environments. I think when there's a will, there's a way. There's always ways to kind of improve it, And I think
setting boundaries.
It's not easy, and I kind of had that. Yeah, I had that as one as well. It's just having boundaries and actually protecting your energy, which is what you said. Those energy vampires is something that's very difficult, but honestly, it's probably one of the best things you'll ever do for yourself.
Again, that kind of that loops back to what we were first talking about, like the unknown. That if you're in something and you are somewhere where it is all you have known, it's very kind of scary to take that step. And I remember reading before, was it about a scarcity mindset, that you're telling yourself, if I leave here, I won't get better. If I kind of take more time with other people, it makes me a bad person. That it's looking at the negatives of it.
I think it's kind of tied to self-worth sometimes. I think you're going to say this. It's like people sometimes feel like they don't deserve any better. Mm-hmm. This can be deep down and without them knowing, but again, it's like, this is the way it's meant to be for me type of thing. That's where, and without going too deep into things, that takes work to realize, especially if you have those beliefs about yourself, to feel good enough to feel. And that's even when we were talking about not want to cause conflict or not be liked, a lot of that sometimes is our own self, because we don't want to feel like we're a burden or that we're trouble, that we're not nearly deserving of that. And so we're just trying to kind of hide in the background or blend in and not cause any trouble, which again only kind of makes that stress and emotional toll on ourselves worse.
I think another thing to help with coping with all of this is having a support system or somebody you can talk to. Like if you're in an environment that you maybe you can't get out of right now, having someone where you could go and vent about that and get it off your chest, or also physically moving it out of your body. Like take up kickboxing, hit a bag, allow yourself to get angry and physically get it out of your body. Because again, a lot of these emotions, we bottle them up and then they fester in our body and they're doing us no good. They're turning into stress. Whereas if you can't maybe get yourself physically out of the situation at the moment, go and physically move your body and shake that energy out.
Yeah, do you ever see that where someone's like attacking the pillow? They just like take like all their anger out on a pillow, but it's like after a stressful day at work, you just like use the pillow as a punch bag.
Yeah, or scream into a pillow. Break a few
plates. Scream. That was it, Matt. Was it like you actually like scream at your highest amount with like into a pillow. And it's meant to be like real good release?
We're not responsible for any complaints now around neighbourhoods who are like,
If anyone hears the muffled screaming noises.
yeah, if the cops get called on anybody who's listening here, do not send it this way.
Eva's going moving in, Johnny. She's going to be roaring into a pillow and punching it.
I think a good thing is actually letting go as well. There's a book called Let Go, which I would definitely recommend. And I was only thinking about this recently. It's like you all said, emotions. We hold on to stuff. You actually need to feel it and let it go. Get it rid of it. And that's the whole physical energy, is like you're actually leaving it. Because when you hold on to stuff, it's no use. It's literally like, again, holding, I look at it like baggage. You're just throwing stuff on top of yourself that you don't need. You actually need to let it out. And that's where a lot of the hard conversations are really important, or just having conversations. When you don't have the conversations, you're not letting it out. So you're carrying it with you on your days. And then that's where I look at that emotional baggage. It's just like constantly building it up. I think you said it about support, Rosie. I think a really good thing is making time for your positive relationships in your life. Because like anything, if you want anything to grow, it needs work, it needs practice, and it needs effort. So, and I think as we get older, a lot of us, again, get a smaller circle. We lose maybe some of the relationships. It can just becomes more effort. Like we're all, even here, we're in 3 different countries out 4 of us. It's harder to make that effort, but I think it's even more important to put the time and effort into that, because not only for the other person is it good, but you get so much out of it. Like, when you said about an energy drainer, when you're around somebody that is really positive and gives you energy, it literally lifts you up, and it makes such a difference. We should have the opposite of that bad apple effect. What would be that? We need to do a study on someone who's going to be the opposite.
A flower or something. A flower.
A rainbow.
There's definitely the
rainbow sunshine effect.
Yeah.
There's definitely a study on it somewhere, definitely.
But you even know that, like, I'll even say, like, last week I went to a breakfast here with a group of women in business, and like the energy, like I came away from that, like I spent the whole day there, but I came away from it like high. I was like, that was so powerful, just being around such positive, supportive people. And you come away from it and you just feel great.
That's last one that we are going to cover is a big one: fear and self-doubt. So I think fear is probably the number one thing that holds people back, and essentially the way that represents itself is in action. Sometimes not feeling good enough, overthinking, caring what people will think. We procrastinate a lot. So I also think fear can be disguised in many ways. A lot of people would be like, oh, I don't have time, or I couldn't do that. That's not for me. Maybe that wouldn't work. That wouldn't work for me. It can be disguised. It's honestly, I find it's one of those like peeling back the layers of the onion. More often than not, things will always come back to actually, I'm afraid to make that decision, to make that change, whatever it is. So, and I think we all have fear and self-doubt. I don't think you can be human without it. It's obviously just not letting it get to a point where it kind of cripples people, or it stops them from taking action on things that would ultimately have a positive effect in their life. Any thoughts on it?
Yeah, something I love to remember about fear, and my auntie told me this, is fear is false evidence appearing real. Since I heard that, I'm like, oh my God, it is. It's like we make up these stories in our heads to be afraid of something that we have no idea of the outcome, because essentially a lot of things that we are afraid of, somebody else has achieved it or done it or got through it. So it is possible, but we'll make up the outcome in our head that we won't be able to get through it. And I think another thing with fear as well is looking back at things that you were afraid of in your past and seeing how you got through them, to reaffirm that, like, okay, I've been scared of stuff before and I actually got through it, and it was actually a lot more fun. The fear, there was no need for that fear, kind of helps them when you do get scared going into the future and being able to like look at different outcomes.
Yeah, and I definitely see it as well, even just with like clients, for example, that, train to start and run a half marathon. When they actually like run that distance, like before they even decided they were going to do a half marathon, something like that would have like really scared them. And I even see this with like a couple of clients in the last couple of weeks that are, doing longer distance runs, and, you have that fear about going out, doing your first 5K, doing your first 10K. But like, if you're slowly building up to that, taking small little steps, like you're not going from 1 kilometer up to 21, you're gradually building that. And each time you're running a new distance, you're afraid of it and you're nervous about doing it, but you go out and you prove to yourself that you can do it, and then, you know, take on the next little step towards the next distance. And I think that really kind of helps with like a lot of fear around, you know, doing hard things or pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, is not to like look down the line or like look too far ahead. Just take it like one day at a time, 1 week at a time. Similar with like weight loss. If you've 20 or 30 pounds to lose, like just look at, okay, what can I do to step towards that this week, today? Not like, what do I need to do in the next 3, 4, 5 months?
And that's, Tommy actually mentioned it last week or week before. That's kind of that exposure therapy is like having a small exposure to that fear is a really good way to get you moving towards it, you know, because again, you don't just run a marathon tomorrow. You start and you just give yourself that, you follow that plan where you're slowly doing more over time, and then you're giving the body the chance to undertake that stress, recover and adapt from it, which is essentially the same process that you go through in the gym, which a lot of things in life can be brought back to a bench press. That's what I said. But it's like, but basically that's what you need to do. And I think even just saying yes to things you wouldn't usually do, like small things that may be scary, whether that's, again, going, like Roshan said, going to that event last week, maybe something you maybe would have backed out of a year ago or 2 years, you know? So it's like, it doesn't have to be, you know, when we say fear, it doesn't have to mean you have to go skydiving tomorrow, which you probably should do anyway, but it's small things. And
Doing this podcast.
exactly. And also you should, I'm going to butcher the quote, Will Smith said it. It's like, on the opposite side of your maximum fear is some of the greatest things you'll experience in life. That's not the quote, but look it up on YouTube. It's a really good video. He talks about skydiving actually in Dubai. It's funny as well. It was like, it's definitely, basically the moral of it is the things that you are afraid of are the things that are going to create the biggest kind of benefits or outcomes in positive changes in your life.
And I think when you're in like that place as well, you know, where you are afraid, like even like Eve was saying, you know, going for that first run, like instead of buying into all the thoughts you have, just sit back and watch them. It was like, even Eve, I was saying to you about like, oh my God, I wish the internal dialogue when I did my first little run a couple of weeks ago, like I was just watching it, I was like, this is crazy. It was like I was worrying about things that I would never really worry about. Or what happens if people see me running? I was like, Sharon, what are you doing?
I always get phantom pains as well before runs. Like I get these fake pains that I create, like, oh no, my glutes are so tight I can't go for that run, or my ankle's really sore, or I have a bit of a, like, I make up all these things to try and convince myself not to do it. And now I'm just like, you're making that up, you're lying, just get out and get it done. But like every day there's hundreds of different reasons not to do the run, and I'll have like 20 reasons not to go on a run, and I'm just like, no, it's getting done.
I always have Eve's voice, Mama didn't raise no little bitch.
I told you, fear can be disguised in many ways, and then it ends up with overthinking and inaction. And even what others will think, like Sharon said there, like, what if other people see me run? It's funny how it's our brain's way of trying to keep us safe. And if you can actually, that's the thing, if you can reframe, when you're afraid of something, reframe it as growth. Like that means you're probably out of your comfort zone. Yeah. And I think another really good thing is changing your environment. I'm trying to think of a good example for this, but our photo shoot, for example, a lot of people would be really terrified about doing a photo shoot, and there would be a lot of fear around it. But then if you come into our photo shoot group and there's all these people I'm like, this is my 10th year doing it. It's like, okay, it's normal for these people. Like they've been through this process, and it's the same thing if you said about being afraid of a podcast. So you could be in an environment where nobody is doing a podcast or has ever done one. When you say like, oh, I need to do a podcast or I'm going to go on a podcast, they could be like, what? Why would you do something like that? But then if you get into a room of people who are all Chris Williamson, Stephen Bartlett and that, they'd be like, hey, that's great. I've been doing podcasts for 10 years. So it becomes the normal. The thing that you're afraid of is actually something that is completely, it's not even a fear. It's just like, yeah, that's what we do. We just do podcasts. That's our job. So I think changing your environment to move towards that, and that could be the same with a healthy lifestyle. And that's why, again, a lot of people are afraid maybe of committing to change or whatever that may be. But if you can get around an environment where living a healthy lifestyle is normal, it's just like it becomes what you do. It brings down that fear because you see everybody else around you doing that, and it's just like, okay, if they're doing that, I can as well.
I think another big thing there is self-compassion and the way you speak to yourself. Going into something that scares you, like reassuring yourself that, okay, this scares me, but I know I can keep myself safe, and I know no matter what the outcome, I'm not going to like beat myself up about that. And show yourself that even though this is scary, that you've got this. Self-compassion, I think, is a huge thing, because we can get wound up in our heads and we're so afraid of failing that we almost beat ourselves up, that we almost act like we've already failed, and treat that voice in our head is already acting like we failed when we haven't even tried the thing. So having that compassion, and again, reframing and thinking like, if your friend came to you with something and she's scared, how would you help her? And then do that to yourself.
I had that as well. You actually said it. Funny enough, you said about like mom didn't raise it a little bit. I think actually affirmations and mantras are really good to use in this situation, because if you can just continually tell yourself that, and I think Rosemary said it originally, that feel the fear and do it anyway, is one I really like. Like if you can, because ultimately with fear, self-doubt, all of this, everything we talk about is like action is your winner. If you don't do anything, it's never going to change. It's like action has to be the solution.
Yeah. I can't remember, last week on the run I made up like a little mantra on the run, but I can't remember what it was. Matt, do you remember what it was?
Run, Forrest, run.
Just keep running. Just keep
idea.
running.
But it literally like just kept me going, like, because I was absolutely dying on the run. But I made up this like little mantra to just push myself towards the end.
1 more kilometre, no? I know you've done that before.
Yeah, that's how I get my runs in.
Yeah, it's like do one more and then get there and do another one.
Yeah.
I also like to think of like compared to like video games. Like think back in the day when you were playing a video game and you're in like a boss round and you're terrified and you're scared and you're doing all you can, but then when you get to the other end, you had this hit of adrenaline and you're like, oh my god, I survived, I got through it. And so, and usually the things that we're afraid of, like we've all said here, it's scary at the start, but when you get to the other side, you have this sense of like achievement. And so it's like trying to hone in on like that adrenaline, that hit of energy that is at the other side of that fear, is something that kind of helps me as well get through them.
Yeah, that Will Smith quote was, God placed the best things in life on the other side of fear.
Yeah. And that's what he talks about in it, is like, it's never doing it it's all the thoughts leading up to doing the thing that is the fearful. Because he was saying about how after he like absolutely terrified, but once he went out of the plane, he's like within 2 seconds everything changed, and it was like it was the most blissful experience ever. But then he was like, all the things he'd been thinking for the last 24 hours, that was all the fear. But actually, what was the point in having any of those thoughts? Because it was completely different than actually doing it, So I think we all relate to that we've all had those situations where we've been really scared about something, then you actually do it and you're like, wasn't that bad? Or I really actually enjoyed that. Or I didn't, the thing that I was worried about didn't matter at all at the end of the day.
It's building that confidence in yourself. And like you said, the more you do it, the more you do little things that scare you, the more you're able to be like, okay, now I know the last time I was afraid of something, this is what happened. And then each time you do it, you're having less of those negative thoughts that are wrecking your head before you actually do the thing that scares you.
Anyone have any other ways to help manage fear and self-doubt? I think that's the last before we we finish up. That is all good. I think we covered everything that I had, and I think just taking action is always the biggest thing if you are experiencing fear, and also being aware of it. A lot of the times, again, the stories, the narrative, the stories we're telling ourselves in our head are just that, stories to stop us, to keep us safe. And so feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah. Find ways to get out of your system, like journal, move, get these thoughts out of your head, and you're able to rationalize everything a little bit more.
So we have a random question for today to finish off. What is something you predict will exist in 10 years that doesn't today?
iPods.
Again?
I know what Eve is talking about, but
It's my invention. It's
Okay.
these little kind of...
before you start, just to know, an
Trademark.
iPod was released like 40 years ago by Steve Jobs, but this is not the iPod that Eve is a different iPod. Explain.
All right, okay. What?
Trademark
EYE pod.
Okay.
So they're like little contact lenses that you put on your eyes, but it's a phone screen.
I think
So
they're
you just,
already
like,
they're
You
already
can
in
see
the
it
test
through your eyes. You don't need to use your phone to look at your phone. It's in your eyes.
Great, that's exactly what we need. There she goes.
He's gone off in there now. She'll be back after.
Just what we needed.
Anyone?
God.
I feel like anything I say is already going to be, there's probably an app for
Yeah,
it.
there's going to be flying
I
cars.
think already.
I'm thinking technology, flying cars.
They're in Dubai, flying taxis.
I don't know. That's a really hard one.
See, I'm thinking virtual stuff, but like,
Yeah.
I guarantee you it's already there. Like virtual PT,
God.
hologram.
That's already there.
It is.
Or we go the complete opposite way,
Yeah.
and there'll be no technology. We'll be back living off the land. That's what I want.
It comes back to uncertainty,
Good
doesn't
country.
it? I don't know. There's definitely going
I'm
to be
just
some
thinking of
cool
like
technology.
supermarkets that'll absolutely run themselves.
Yeah. I think that's a big one, the what is it, the robots? I'm just thinking of Dubai. I could probably just Google Dubai, what's actually being made, and like they're like 10 years ahead of the rest of the world. Flying taxis is one that's in Dubai now, isn't it?
What?
I
That's
could
in
say
Dubai.
that. Yes, I think they're... No. Is it flying taxi? Yes.
Yeah.
No, but a robot taxi as well. There's
Yeah.
one that's tested. No, I think that's been in America as well now.
In America, those Google taxis, they literally just pick you up and there's nobody in the car.
That's so weird.
So good.
Weirdly, we talked about this before on a podcast or something, and it was in my Instagram feed or Eve's the next day. So weird.
Runners that make
And we've
you
never
run,
seen
like
it.
that move. I think they're out too.
We'll have to see. We'll have to come back to this in 10 years and go, okay, what is actually...
We'll regroup.
We'll do a reunion podcast and see what did we predict.
I'll
We'll
be a
probably be
robot.
actually hologram. We probably will be holograms ourselves.
We
Like
look
the,
younger than
like
we
the
are
screen
now.
roll. Yeah, we'll actually all be 10 years younger in 10 years' time. Brian Johnson will have come out with something that we'll actually be all
100%.
de-aging.
Yeah.
We'll be kids talking to each other. Remember when we were older? That's how we talk about. Remember when we were really old doing this podcast?
Back in our day.
Yeah.
Remember, front in the day.
Right, guys, we are good. Eve is back. Eve, it's 10 years. We've skipped 10 years.
To the future, Eve.
Right, guys, thank you for joining us. Hopefully you found today valuable, and we will see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Future Fitness Lifestyle. If you found value in today's show, please take a moment to leave us a review and share it with someone who could benefit. Every single review or share helps us grow the show and will allow us to keep bringing you more great content. Stay tuned for weekly episodes where we'll be sharing more tips and insights to help you take your health, fitness, and mindset to the next level. Thanks again for joining us, and remember, consistency beats perfection. See you in the next episode.